Metro Supply Chain is the official sponsor of the Ask the Experts Theater at Edge 23, pioneering the future of supply chain with investments in advanced automation, robotics, and business intelligence. Metro Supply Chain delivers innovative, real-world supply chain solutions that advance business. Learn more at metroscg.com.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for Supply Chain Quarterly's Outstanding Women in Supply Chain Award presentation and panel discussion. My name is Susan Lacefield, and I am the Executive Editor of CSCMP Supply Chain Quarterly, and I will be moderating the panel discussion today. But first off, we are very grateful for our sponsor, Metro Supply Chain, for their support in recognizing these amazing supply chain leaders. Metro Supply Chain is the largest privately held contract logistics provider in Canada, with over 100 sites in North America and the United Kingdom. And today we have helping to present the awards Sarah Opperman, who is the Senior Director of Business Development for Metro Supply Chain Group. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Susan. Today we are honoring two exceptional women who have made remarkable contributions to the supply chain industry. The industry requires strategic thinking, innovative problem solving, effective leadership, and these women have consistently demonstrated their commitment to excellence. Their dedication, passion, and accomplishments have not only advanced the supply chain landscape, but have also served as an inspiration to countless professionals. Our first award winner is Jackie Sturm. Jackie leads the operation for Intel's multi-billion-dollar global supply chain, which has been recognized in 19 consecutive years in Gartner's Supply Chain Top 25. Her international team supports both direct and indirect procurement, business continuity, supply chain systems and analysts, and the Intel Supply Chain Environmental and Social Governance programs, which include Intel's first mover conflict minerals initiation. Jackie is committed, an advocate for value-added manufacturing, engineering, and trade as the economic foundation for thriving societies. Jackie sponsors targeted advancement programs to address challenges faced by women, underrepresented minorities in technology. Please join us in congratulating Jackie.
Our second award winner today is Meredith Westafar. Meredith leads Tesla's factory design team, designing the layouts and material flows for new Tesla gigafactories. Meredith joined Tesla in 2015 as the company was just beginning construction of its first gigafactory in Nevada. She owned the material flow design for getting all parts to the powertrain manufacturing lines, including developing an automated guided vehicle program with more than 50 AGVs. Her ability to drive systems-level thinking to complex and ambiguous problems which span the entire company has catapulted her scope of responsibilities to include global factory design and strategic planning. Her engineering team designed layouts and material flow for Gigafactory Shanghai, Gigafactory Berlin, Gigafactory Texas, and has been instrumental in the selection of the site for Gigafactory Monterey. Meredith and her team have supported Tesla's Model 3, Model Y, and Cybertruck and influenced the design of new products to best benefit the company overall. Please join me in congratulating Meredith.
Congratulations.
So now we move on to our panel discussion part of the program. Jackie and Meredith, thank you so much for joining us today. I thought maybe we'd kick off with you could tell us maybe your key responsibilities in your current position and your path and journey for getting to there. Meredith, maybe you could start.
Sure, I'll be happy.
Sorry.
So I'm going to stand. I feel sort of weird sitting up here. I'm just going to move this out of the way. I've been warned these tip over. Okay. So I run the factory design team for Tesla. So we design at the gigafactories of the world. I started at the first one in Nevada when it was just like a big flat piece of land. Basically, we worked in one trailer. There were 14 of us. It was not enough people to build a factory, but we pushed forward. And now we are starting construction on our 6th gigafactory in Monterey, which is like insane how fast we moved, right? In any typical car company, we'd still be on the first one. But we've been able to incorporate like lots of new changes along the way. My team does the material flow and the layout for those factories, which essentially means like we are the city planners for the factory. So there's manufacturing teams that do the design of each of the individual manufacturing lines. We have a wonderful supply chain team, of course, that does the actual supply chain and like the sourcing and the logistics and all that stuff. We make it all work as a system, right? So the way that we intersect with supply chain, one of the big ways, and like what we're going to talk about a little bit more in the next topic, I think, is like docks, right? Warehouses, logistics yards, like all of these things need to be planned into the overall factory to make that system work really well. When we're talking about something like Texas, it's like Disney World. Like it's huge. It's a massive place that tons of people are coming in like on a shift schedule, right? So we have all of these peaks, all of these ebbs, all of these flows, but then all of this steady logistics traffic that comes in at the same time. So we really have to think about it up front. And if we're doing site selection or we're doing road design, like infrastructure design, we need to plan. And that's really hard for supply chain for the future because it's really hard to know where your customers are going to, or where your suppliers are going to be based, especially if we don't necessarily know what products we're making yet. It's difficult to source parts. So that's sort of me. That's a little bit about the role that we have in the company and how that intersects with the supply chain and maybe some of the topics that you guys are a little closer to day to day. I got started in Tesla when I just randomly applied there when I was going to the Bay Area for a work trip from my previous company. I had never been, I moved from South Carolina over to Reno. I had never been to the West Coast. I went to San Francisco, the big city. Was like, oh my God, what can I do in San Francisco? This will be fun to go check stuff out. Oh, Tesla's there. I think I've heard of Tesla before. What is that? Like, do they do factory tours? And I just happened to click on the applicants page and was like, well, sure, I can do that. And cleaned up my resume, sent it off, and got a call back the week later. So it's all been history. So I really appreciate my recruiter getting me out there. It's been 8.5 awesome years working with, some of the best engineers in the world, which is really, really an honor. It's been fun.
Great. And Jackie, why don't you share some of your story?
Well, I am not going to sit in the chair after Meredith. Dynamic. And I'm going to start with my path.
Oh yeah, flip the mic maybe the other way. Is that better?
Okay, I'm going to start with my path. Can y'all hear me?
Oh.
Okay, my path is an interesting one. All my background is finance and economics. And so at Intel, a lot of people have started their careers straight out of school. I like to describe myself as a person with a checkered past. I got out of school. I went to Hewlett-Packard before it was broken up. Had a very fascinating time, always in finance. And at some point, I decided I want to branch out a little bit. So I started my tour of Silicon Valley. And that tour began with HP, but I moved on to a startup. And it was the first fabless design company making semiconductors. Really loved it, but after about a year of total financial stress, I decided, I think I need to do something more stable. So naturally, I went to what was called Camp Runamuck at the time, Apple Computer, and had a fascinating time. Again, all focused on finance, but associated with manufacturing, which, as you heard in my bio, manufacturing to me in value-added industry, they are the lifeblood of having a middle class that can support the standard of living that we all want for ourselves and our children. And someday you'll have them and you'll know. So Apple was a wild ride. I learned something new every day. Some of it things I never wanted to know, and some of it things that I have used throughout my career. At 8.5 months pregnant, 7 years into Apple, they decided, Jackie, your job's moving to Texas. Well, they'll be going there without me, and decided there's a little company in the Bay Area that's doing something exciting. And it was Intel. And they were just starting, I think they had hit their first $1 billion of revenue that year. And I decided, oh, I'll go there. And I went, and I was very closely engaged with the factories. I love factories. They do so much. And so I worked with them. I spent a lot of time in the capital equipment space, trying to understand opportunities and capabilities. And at one point, the CEO and the chairman came to me and they said, Jackie, we really want you to move into the materials and the supply chain space. We want you to make it more strategic. I had never thought of leaving finance. And however, when the chairman and the CEO suggest a new job to you, your answer is, okay. And so I went into that role. I didn't know what to expect. I'm not a supply chain background person, but I can tell you that I have come to appreciate this opportunity so much. Being involved with suppliers, with transportation companies, with the people who make our factories run, and seeing the excellence that they bring every day, whether it be, designing a layout for one of our multi-billion-dollar fabrication facilities, or bringing the most high-purity chemicals or high-precision equipment up to run on some of the world's most sensitive technologies, all of that has been a joy to me. How's that? Okay. So that has been an exceptional experience. I've been doing the supply chain type of work for about the past 13 years. Every time I go to a new supplier factory, every time I look at different lanes, every time I see some of the systems and tools that are incorporating AI or predictive analytics, I feel like I have come to the right place. And as Kevin O'Mara, who started the Gartner Top 25 group, used to say, supply chain saves the world again and again. And that's why I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm excited to see all of you here today.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Let's move on now to talk about some of the challenges you face. As supply chain leaders, we face so many challenges, and many of them are much different today than they were just 5 years ago. What are the one or two things that keep you two up at night? Jackie, why don't we start with you this time?
One of the major things that is keeping me awake at night is the lack of ready talent to support our businesses. We're at a company stage where we're trying to expand our capacity, create a footprint that supports regional supply chains to adapt to the changing environment. And currently I'm building a factory in Arizona. I'm about 8,000 craft trade workforce short of being able to fully support that facility construction. And in the event that we get the factory built, which we are going to do because supply chains make stuff happen, right? Come rain or wind or fire. And so when we get the factory built, then I'm also short another 3,000 STEM workers to operate the factory. We don't have people actually doing the transactions in the factory, but we do have people who have to manage and maintain the critical equipment. We will be using a lot of AI and ML to address that, but today nothing replaces the skilled workforce who can do those things for us. So that's one area. And then the other area I'll talk about, I mentioned how semiconductors require extreme conditions, parameters to support the sensitivity of the technology. And one of the situations that we're confronting is a lot of chemical regulations. And although I support the intention behind the regulations, there's a discontinuity between the time frames it takes to replace a chemical, for example. Probably takes at least 10 years to fully validate that that new chemical formulation can meet our needs. but the regulations are generally offering only about a 5-year runway. And so trying to get in front of that, bring on more green chemistry, and also engage with regulators to make sure that we are looking at the mitigations that can responsibly source, transport, use, store, and then remediate the chemicals is something that I'm spending a lot of time on. I could go for about 7 or 8 more hours if you had time, but I was only allowed to talk about 2 challenges, so I'm going to hand it over to Meredith now.
All right, and that's a perfect tee up for mine actually on the workforce side. So I'm going to talk a little bit about things that keep me up at night in terms of the factory design, and again, sort of how that plays back into the supply chain stuff. We've been trying, can you guys hear me okay? Is mine all right? All right, cool. We have been trying to automate a lot of things at Tesla. If you've kept up with Tesla at all, we have all kinds of automation doing all kinds of things. Within the 4 walls of our factory, there's a crazy amount of automation, right? We have some of the world's most amazing automation teams designing bespoke systems to do all of our manufacturing. We design all of our products in-house. We design most of our electronics in-house. We do all of our software in-house. We've got some of the most amazing engineers doing those things. But if you go to our warehouse, it's full of forklifts, right? It's full of forklifts loading those same stupid pallets off of those stupid trucks, getting splinters everywhere. There's dirt bumping around. It's dangerous, right? I hate going into the dock loading spaces. I had a really bad experience as an intern at Publix in the crate unloading area, where I was just terrified of forklifts ever since. So there might be a little bit of personal history there as well. But in general, it's really, really hard to get pallets off of a truck and into the factory at the scale of an auto manufacturer, right? If you're talking about 1 or 2 really specific parts coming from a local supplier, totally fine. All you people who are doing truck unloading automation, I see you. I know you're there. It's really difficult. It's really difficult to replace that because you need to have the packaging that is works really well with automation, right? So let's say we have a forklift AGV or something. You need precision, right? Forklift needs to be able to come up and see it with the sensors that it has and say, okay, I feel like this is safe. How many trailers have you guys seen where you go in and there's smashed pallets everywhere, right? It happens. It's totally normal. And it's because supply chain is so complicated, right? It goes all the way back. It's not just within our 4 walls, right? It goes all the way back to the supplier. And our suppliers are spread everywhere. We use thousands of parts for cars, right? You have to have suppliers everywhere. We did one really fun study for Elon one time. We were like, what if we just made everything? Which was right before we did Model 3. And we're like, oh, hold on. So we got a picture of mines, right? Where are mines? Could we put our factory on top? Let's just do a thought experiment, right? Could we put our factory on top of all of the kinds of mines and mine the ore and really do everything in-house? Obviously not, right? So we have a supply chain that's spread across the world. And that comes all the way back to our docks and why we have those stupid forklifts unloading those trailers, right? So the answer to this problem isn't really straightforward, and that's why it keeps me up at night, right? We need to continue to foster supplier relationships so they're very close, right? We need to continue to change truck fleets for the future, not to be what they are right now. I'd love if the Tesla Semi was pulling them. They're looking great. We did a kickoff event a couple days ago. It's really exciting to see. But side unloading trailers that interface better with automation versus going all the way up and down the long axis of a rear unload trailer. These are the kind of thinkings that we need, but are really frustrating to me because we can't go change them, right? Because it's I want the entire U.S. to please have side unloading trailers for me now, right? Which Elon will say, right? We're we're here for it. It looks really good on paper, but it's going to take 8 years to go build them all, right? And we have to buy the entire fleet. It becomes a global problem at that point, and you really have to think about it that way. So anyone who wants to talk about this more, I could also talk about it for hours. I'd love to talk more about ways that we can use packaging better. I hate cardboard as well, but it's just a piece of the puzzle, right? When you have a global supply chain, and talk about the automation solutions that can get us where we need to go.
Hey, Meredith, we need to talk about ores and mining.
Ooh,
but
great.
we need to step it up to refining as well, because even if you have the deposit and you're right there, if you can't refine it, then you've got a miss. So we need to talk about that because I think that is a shared goal.
Okay. sounds good.
That leads to a good question is how can you better work with your suppliers on these complex challenges? What sort of initiatives are you doing around that? Since you both have talking about way upstream in your supply chain that might seem not your direct supplier, but your supplier's supplier. What are some ways we can collaborate on those issues?
Should I start?
Yes.
Okay. When you want to work with suppliers on driving new initiatives, I think it's crucially important that you make it easy for them to do what you want them to do. Anytime you can create a path of least resistance in physics or with people, you're going to have a more sustainable answer. And so my experience with putting these things together with suppliers is we need to band together with fellow travelers to say, how do we set some standards? That's one of the things we did when we initiated our conflict minerals program. At the time we did that back in 2009, there was no act, there was no Dodd-Frank. We just knew that we didn't want to have civilian atrocities being the cost to have tantalum, tin, tungsten, or gold in our supply chain. And so my team, went to Africa. They traveled 250,000 miles to just walk the flow. Try to understand, how does the material come from that original mine? Then what's the chain of custody option that takes it all the way to the smelter? Once again, getting back to the refiner, who is a final point of differentiation. And as we did that, we learned, here's how you can do a mass balance to monitor this. Here's how you can create a certified anti-counterfeiting chain of custody. And here's also, while we're there and we care about sustainability, here's how you can build your mine to be safer for human conditions. And as we did that, we identified a documented process that we could share with all of our fellow travelers to say, okay, if you're making a laptop or you're making a car or you're in some industrial option, here is a process that can be used. There were no laws to reinforce it. Smelters had to agree, miners had to agree. But through the course of that process, we enlisted a lot of others who wanted to participate. And it made it easier for our suppliers because they got a standard. They could hear from customer X, Y, and Z, this is how we want you to do it. And a lot of these sub-suppliers have very limited resources. They're trying to provide compliance, but they don't have time to create a process and set a standard. And so that worked really, really well. And even today, we're now being asked by the OECD, the State Department, Kigali, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, please come to our mines and tell us how we can do a better job for human rights, for sustainability, and to please our customers. So that's one method that we have found works quite well.
That's awesome. I will tie mine back a little bit more to the topic that I was just talking about in terms of the supply chain being really spread out and having a hard time getting what I think of sort of in bulk as returnable packaging that makes automation a little bit easier. For us, it's really talking with suppliers, right? It's being partners with our suppliers as early as we can. Tesla moves very fast. If I didn't mention, this is the 5th factory in 8 years. So we move very, very fast. So we don't always have the time to say, okay, what's our 5-year plan? Let's go work with this vendor and we'll come up with something. It tends to be a lot faster. So we need suppliers that can move fast with us, right? Which is tricky and can be difficult, especially with some of the suppliers that we're talking about and old auto that do some of the types of work that we do. So when we're talking about a new site, a new factory, let's use Mexico for an example. What I see as being the solution to this problem is we need to partner with our suppliers to be as localized as possible when we have volumes that support that, right? We're not talking about setting up shop for something like one little production line. We're talking about setting up shop for a world power of auto manufacturing, right, at this point. I feel like I'm sort of going a little bit against what you said in terms of make it easy for them. We're not really that easy to work with, but we are fun sometimes. That's worth something. But it's sort of, you got to put a little risk in there, right? You're coming down, like, you got to take a risk with us. Like, we're ready to do it. We're putting, our neck on the line. Come take a risk with us and we'll grow together. And let's figure out how to do something that's new and like something that's different and something that's not just the way that we've always done it before, right? Like, let's make the future of supply chain, which requires risk, right? It's not going to be easy. So that's where we're at.
I guess I wouldn't say we make it easy for suppliers. I think we create really challenging goals, and we are trying to ask them to do something they've never done before.
Sure.
But by creating something that is clear, even though it might be tough, I think we do get to great solutions. And sometimes they say it's fun to do that with us.
I'm trying another microphone. One of the things that you're here today for is being recognized as supply chain leaders. And I was wondering if you could touch upon maybe a few of the skills or experiences you had that helped shape you as leaders today.
I think for me, it's being willing to step into the breach. I've always sort of thought, well, I think I have an idea, and maybe I should jump in first before any of these other people who, might not be as aggressive or assertive and ready to jump in do. And so truly being willing to step up. I had an old boss one time, and he said something that really resonated with me. He said, Jackie, if you want to get a hit, you have to step up to the plate. And I noticed that a lot of times, and this I would characterize as not just a women's issue, but I do see it disproportionately with women. They tend to be quiet. They tend to kind of wait to be asked to do something. And so my focus has always been, how do I think about what needs to be done and jump into that first? And I have found that to be a real value for me, because often the benefit of being a woman is people are looking at you. And so when you jump into something and you take an ugly assignment, you knock it out of the park, they're like, okay. And then you do it again and they say, oh, it's a body of work. It's a reputation. And you start to be someone who's trusted to take on bigger and bigger things. So I think that willingness to try something new, put myself out there, is something that has really helped me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that was really well said. I think that in the engineering world, which is sort of the branch that I came up in, it's difficult. It's difficult in school, right? It's difficult when you're the minority that's in that group. But I think as you get it, as like you get your 2 feet into the workplace, as you really start to do your stuff and you start to say, I got this. Like, this is fun. I can do this too. It's really interesting that you get it starts to sort of flip, right? It starts to become a power at some point where people are watching, right? People are paying attention. Like, oh wow, yeah, it's not just a monkey that can do a trick, right? It's like, oh, it's an engineer. It works. Cool. It does good stuff. And that really starts to create a following for you, like professionally, which I think is a pretty amazing thing. For me personally, I've also just been, I don't know, always sort of loud, and aggressive's maybe a strong word, but maybe it's sometimes when we need to be. And that's worked really well in manufacturing, which is where I've come up through, in like dirty old factories, right? You can't just be the quiet person who's like taking notes in the corner. You have to like step up and say, this is what's happening. Here's my data. This is why this is, this is why this is what it is. And this is what I think we should do about it. And people at the end of the day, they just want to know what to do. Like, people are looking for a reason to follow you. That is really true for anybody and anything. Like, they want to know what to do. And if you can prove why it's a good thing and that that's what you want, people will follow you. It's really great. Like, you have to make sure you're right. That's important. But if you have that, like, I think that it's a really great way to make a career in any industry.
Yeah, I think I do want to say one of the things you need to do is take a stand, have a position. If you're just one of the crowd waiting to figure out what the common wisdom is, then you're just going to be one of the crowd. If you want to be somebody who others are going to follow, or you want to be viewed as a leader, you have to have a position, a stand that you want to drive to. And you might evolve it because, as you said, you'd like to be right, But in your industry and in my industry, things change. It's really dynamic. So being able to say, okay, I'm evolving this, the principles might stand, but we need to veer right rather than dead ahead is valuable as well.
Meredith, you mentioned being in the manufacturing place, and I love both of yours passion for manufacturing. There is a dearth, as you mentioned, Jackie, of talented technicians and talented frontline workers in the manufacturing and logistics and supply chain space. How can we start to build back up that talent pool? And how can we attract people to these jobs again?
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing at Tesla, we have a lot of need for automation technicians, right? We can buy the entire world's supply of 6-axis robots. Like, just to put that on the table, that is a limiting factor for us sometimes. There are literally not enough in the world for us to do some of the projects that we need. So we have a lot of robotics engineers. We need a lot of techs, right? We need a lot of techs to make everything work. It really takes an army. So we've had to go out and train, right? I think it's on us. I think it's incumbent upon us as an industry, if we're going to turn to automation, if we're going to need all of these new jobs, to help create those new jobs, right? We don't want to displace people who are working in less skilled jobs with more skilled people. We want to create that opportunity for them to become more skilled people, right? So we've got robotics institutes and industries. We've got, in Nevada, we have a high school program for robotics competitions. And a lot of those things are starting to pay dividends for us now across the country because we've been able to develop that workforce to some extent. And I think that it sort of helps other industries want to ante up too with being part of that solution, because it's not exclusively up to the educational system. I don't think it should be exclusively up to the people who may benefit from being retrained to get that retraining all on their own. That's putting a burden in entirely the wrong part of the problem, right? So that's one of the ways that we're attempting to address it. But there's still we just need people, right? It's a huge piece of it. Also, if no one has seen Optimus, our robot, our humanoid robot, look up some videos. That's fun. That's for the less skilled work, so we can get people out of those roles and into the more skilled jobs.
Well, I think the education angle is critically important, and as a company, we support multiple programs, whether they're in the community college, whether they're in the high schools, and also we have partnerships with Arizona State University, we have partnerships with the Ohio State University, and many, many others. We work with MIT's Center for Transportation and Logistics, and try to engage with the professional associations, as well as just meet individual human beings where they are. You know, we have programs in Oakland to help middle schoolers write code and learn how they can do that. Because I think the world has moved beyond a lot of the what we think of as the old kind of factory worker, and more to somebody who can deal with the automated equipment, maintain it, operate it. And so, you know, a lot of that is a big focus for us. We look at programs like the innovation centers that many of the major warehouse management companies have with cobots, and we're trying to institute some of those where it's appropriate in our factories. And then we're also working with the unions and the trade councils to say, how do we attract more people into apprenticeship programs? Because, you know, process piping and mechanical and electrical, some of the bio improvements to do water reclamation or dispose of waste in an environmentally friendly way. Those programs are really helpful, and we try to work with fellow travelers, other companies who care about it, and the universities. And we've seen some exciting stuff happen, but there's so much more that needs to happen. So I think the more we partner with other major customers of those workforces to share the opportunities, I think people will be excited. In some cases, I just think there's not a deep awareness of the opportunities that exist for people all across different skill levels. You don't have to be a postdoc in chemical engineering, and you don't necessarily have to be a technician. There's lots of ways that you can engage in the reindustrialization, essentially, of North America and Europe. And so I look forward to maybe learning more from you also, Meredith.
Sounds fun.
Moving up maybe the career ladder a bit, what skills do you think future supply chain leaders will need, and are they different from the skills that we need now?
They're the exact same. They need to communicate, whether it's with your internal partners, whether it's with your suppliers, whether it's with your customers, it could be regulators. You need to understand the 360 view of what your world is like. And what we learned in COVID, what we've learned in so many situations is it's people who are going to make it happen. You can automate all you want. You can have all the cobots and robots you want. But ultimately, when you pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm desperate for this thing, can you help me? It's the person that you've been communicating with for years. You've built a trusting relationship. You don't want to be making your first call to someone you need help from to be, I need help. It should be something that's built on a pre-existing a relationship. The next thing I would say, because I'm going to say there's three things. So in addition to great communication around the spectrum of participants, you need to be adaptable. I'm so excited to be in the supply chain industry, the semiconductor industry, because everything is changing. And now is the time to say, okay, I'm not going to hang on to the old ways. I'm going to cause a revolution of change in my company. I'm ready to take on the new tools and the new capabilities. They aren't going away. And those who adopt early are going to have a chance to help shape the future. They'll work with the providers. They'll be able to help them understand, what's my use case? What would be helpful to me? And then the last thing, you already mentioned it, it's passion. As leaders or as individuals, you have to set yourself on fire. And if you can do that, that enthusiasm is just going to come across to others. And that's what's going to excite them to follow you or to join you or to learn more about what the opportunity is that you're sharing.
I think that was really well said. I will just underscore one of the points that you made in your first point about the 360 view. I think, again, my role is factory design. We do like the factory as a system, right? We care about not just this one production line that people are designing, right? We care how that fits into the overall picture. We care about how it works with construction. We care about how it works with all of the utility design. We care about how it works with supply chain and do you have enough space for your parts? Have you considered the ergo stuff? The whole system, all the way back to as far as you can go. Supply chain's the same thing, right? You really have to think about the whole system. I can't just care about the docks, right? If I'm just talking about automating the dock, that's just a piece of automation. Great. We're all very pleased to have this automation. It's cool, but it doesn't solve the problem of the system. And we can all get really tied up in what we're working on, right? And getting the right answer locally, but it's difficult to get the right answer globally. And it takes a lot of learning. And I think passion is something that helps you see, right? And understand and, recognize the other opportunities that you have for sort of completing that 360 circle. Yeah. Just important to try to see it all and step out and understand the system and not just the thing that you are optimizing for.
And given that we are giving out a Women in Supply Chain award, I think it would be a good to just touch on the subject of being a woman in supply chain. I see Nancy Nix in the audience, and Awesome and Gartner's recent survey says that there are more women in the supply chain space than there ever have been before. It's at a historic high. So given this very, very positive change, our awards and panel discussions and interest groups, like what we're doing right now, are they still necessary, or would our time and effort be better put somewhere else?
You want me to start? I have thoughts on this. So I've been invited to stuff as a woman speaker previously, and it's a complicated sort of thing. What I would really like for that to stay out there is outstanding people in supply chain, right? I would like to be recognized for being a very good professional, right?
You are.
Yeah, thank you. And it's difficult because I'm also really happy to have this opportunity to speak here. I think that this is a really great forum. So I don't want to downplay that at all. But I think that it's time for us to just start incorporating our star people across the industry into keynotes, right? We're here to talk about supply chain challenges. We haven't been talking about women challenges the whole time. We're talking about what's really difficult in the industry today. So I think that just trying to have people be part of like a diverse group of people, not just women, right? Be represented across keynotes, right? Being represented across panels. And then maybe having some more targeted things for like a networking event or something like that. That's maybe a little bit more focused on like how to be a successful woman starting an industry, where you can be, you know, that voice, maybe in a smaller setting and maybe in a more intimate setting, or just like a more casual setting, to help to encourage people and to, you know, help them see what was your path, how did that thing happen? What advice would you give to another young woman today going through engineering school or going through getting into manufacturing, which is a bunch of dudes, right? I would love to do more of those things and then be able to present just as, you know, as a professional, and not necessarily as a woman.
Yeah, I want to echo that. But I do think that there is value for women in some cases to understand those paths that we're talking about. Ultimately, I do expect it to be top supply chain, top operational person or whatever, and that's the way the world is going to look at things. But it does mean that women also have to make sure that they are taking those operations assignments. And that's why it's so encouraging to see the increasing numbers of women in operations, in manufacturing, in supply chain. You know, you're not going to achieve that top leadership role if you're in a staff position as easily as if you own the P&L or you own the delivery of the factory on time that is pivotal to delivering the S3. People who take ownership for the business or the technical solution, those are the people who are going to be outstanding leaders. And so I think women have started to bridge that gap pretty well. But there's also real value in working with some of our up-and-coming young women to just help them, you know, feel that sponsorship and support if they're transitioning into a role that, you know, hasn't traditionally been for women. So I think that there's still a place for those kinds of forums, but I absolutely agree with the targeting comment. Let's help people move into that next level. Let's not focus on, is it possible for women to be leaders? So I think we know the answer.
Yeah, I would say if that said like Tesla and Intel talk about supply chain, we'd probably have a different group.
Yeah, I think so.
I agree. I could ask you questions all day, but I want to let the folks out here have an opportunity. If you have a question you'd like to ask Meredith or Jackie, you raise your hand. I can run over the mic for you.
I love questions.
They do. If not,
I have a question for Jackie. Since you started off in finance, do you think that helped you a lot on your way through supply chain? Or do you think you could have gotten to where you gotten without doing that finance route first?
I think it is a tremendous foundation. I would absolutely recommend that as you're starting in the initial years of your career, that you build a broad foundation, not a narrow one. I think engineering as a foundation, and industrial engineering is really adaptive. Finance, economics, things where you think about the macro answer in some cases, that is really valuable. And I think throughout your career, if you can sort of move between different kinds of functions, you start to learn what is most relevant. When Meredith talks about what it's like on the dock, it's great for you to know what the dock is like, but then also to be in her shoes to say, oh, now I really get why it's important. Or in the financial role, you know, cash is king wherever you go. And ultimately, we should all realize if you work in a company, you work for finance because we got to deliver the financial results. But that underpinning of knowledge about how the financial statements work and what the implications are of different alternatives has been very helpful for me. And then in my finance roles, I worked extensively with engineering teams and with mergers and acquisitions teams and other types of functions where I also got a smattering of their priorities. I really recommend that you think about how do I build that foundation to work from.
Anyone else have questions? I thought it.
has outstanding professionals in supply chain. What advice would you give to young professionals coming into the field with this merging between technology and workforce and all this going on?
I would say, just in general, that this is not like super duper specific to supply chain, but I think for anyone coming into the workforce, internships. My God, internships, as many as you can get. My family, when I was going through college, was like, you shouldn't do internships like it's your job to be a student, and that was terrible advice. It was very well-meaning, but it was terrible advice. Please do internships. Delay if you can make it work. I understand that there's certainly complications and extenuating circumstances where that's not always possible. But if you can do a diverse set of internships, you can figure out what you like, right? You can figure out what you're good at, and where you like what you don't like. Forklifts, for example. I don't ever want to stand around a forklift line with a stopwatch ever again. Write that at the top of my no list. It really sets you up for figuring out things in the future, and it does give you that base, right? So, what a dock is, right? My career up to my job at Tesla was very diverse in understanding sourcing and understanding buying and understanding production planning, and then being on the production line and seeing shit go south, right, in the middle of the night and get called in, the thingy's broken, not again, right? And understanding what the pain of manufacturing is. Your journey may look different, but it's really helpful to have all of those different paths, right? Those different experiences to help you understand what you're doing and to be able to to get it and to move forward.
I love that advice. It just says you learn what's relevant. And if you're in supply chain, everything is relevant because you are serving so many masters. Having a sense of why they care, why it's a problem, and then being able to be the person who says, okay, now what? Here's what we're going to do. It's really a great background.
Hello. Thank y'all so much for being here. It's really inspiring to hear y'all talk and be so passionate about it. I'm a graduate student at UT, and I'm very passionate about sustainability. And that's one reason why I came into supply chain, is because I was thinking, how can I impact and make a difference in the best way? And so for me, I'm really interested in manufacturing, right? We were talking about reclaiming the water. So right now I know, especially globally, there's a heavy emphasis on carbon, right? The carbon footprint. But for me, I think one of the big things, especially with East Palestine, water quality, right? Is that a big emphasis for y'all in general? Or I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
I'm happy to start on that. Water is a big focus for us. We operate in the desert or we operate in the rainforest. And in the desert, they want to keep water. And in the rainforest, they want to make sure not too much is going through the storm drains. And we have to use ultra pure water. In New Mexico, for example, we take water out of the Rio Grande, and then we have to ultra purify it, and then we use it in our process. And then we have to cool it down. We have to return it to its original brackishness and send it back into the Rio Grande to support the flora and fauna that lives there. So that has been something that our bioengineers have spent careers doing. And in recent years, we've started to do not just our own reuse, recycle, and reclaim of water. We're working with community reclamation projects in Arizona to the extent that I can recycle 8 million gallons of water a day in my Arizona factory, but I can also help the local community reclaim water through volunteer and funded programs that we do. In Israel, we have bio water recovery that has been very, very effective. And so I think if you look at the community usage patterns and you try to figure out, okay, what is our use? What are the alternatives? Can I reduce my water needs? Can I reclaim the water? Can I assist the communities? You're going to really make it a disproportionate impact because a lot of communities don't have great reclamation programs. It's more something that they do when the water quality drops precipitously. So it's an area of tremendous focus for us as our greenhouse gases. I'd love to talk with you in detail if you'd like to explore more.
Any thoughts on sustainability from
I
Tesla?
have lots of thoughts on sustainability for Tesla. I do. I mean, I think it should be pretty clear that for Tesla, sustainability is a huge focus, right? It's why we exist as a company. And the same thing has been true for our factories. We designed the whole factory from the ground up, right? We have our own infrastructure engineering team that's doing the same kind of really difficult work to do the water purification. I don't understand it at all, but it's really cool. And we've been able to use water through our processes and then like recycle it back through. We use a lot of what is called, it's a really exciting name, processed water, to help cool things down in the factory because we have a lot of automation that's running and it likes to get cool. It doesn't necessarily need super duper clean water, but it needs like pretty clean water, and the system has to be designed to like fit just the right niche for that type. So it's taken a ton of work by those engineers to get those systems in place, but certainly water is a focus. And we do a cell manufacturing as well, so like making batteries, right? It takes a lot of water to do those sorts of things. So it's had to be a big focus. We've had to do a lot of learning very quickly on how to be reasonable with that. But of course, also we'll slap solar on just about anything. And fortunately make quite a lot of it. So we're able to do that for our factories. We look at like all of the like peak power and like all that kind of stuff to try to make sure that we're as sustainable as possible with the sites that we choose. It's absolutely a core tenet of the company.
Any more questions from the audience? It's a great opportunity here. I have a question still. Meredith, you talked a lot about how fast Tesla moves and speed and agility is becoming so important to the supply chain. Do you have any suggestions for companies that are maybe more traditional and they're looking to move faster? How can they become more efficient?
Ooh, that one's hard. How can they become faster? I mean, when you go back to they've got to start taking risks, right? Like if you're going to be flexible, you can't like, this is the way we've always done it, and we're going to have this budget meeting, and we're going to have this. Very sorry for the finance reference there, personal event. We're gonna go through all of these steps, and like you have to be vetted this way, and then there's all of these systems. Sort of similar to what you said about the chemical vetting, right? Like we just get so much in our own way after things have been done a certain way for too long, right? It's like, well, we do it this way, and Tesla comes up, and we're like, but we want it this way because this makes more sense. Like the more established suppliers are often like, we don't like that. We've been doing this. God, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. We've been doing this for 57 years, right? Or whatever. Like in this room, there's a combined 500 years of experience. And I'm like, well, that's great. We're not working with you guys because your idea, like the stuff that you're sharing isn't good, right? I don't like it. It's the experience. It's great to have. Like experience is a wonderful thing. Like we should leverage that. But it can really get in the way, right? It can sort of build these layers that it takes to like crack down back into that innovation that probably got that company started in the first place. So I think they just need to be willing to take more risks.
Jackie, any thoughts on speed and agility?
It's just such a great answer. I'm not sure I can add something to it, but I do think one of our founders, Andy Grove, said one time, you have to disrupt yourself. And that is the only way that companies that live on technology can maintain a prominent position. You just have to say, okay, this works today. What should kill it? And how do I move to the next thing? Because the only way you beat your competitors is you out-innovate them. And innovation isn't fins and grills. Innovation is fundamentally disrupting what you've done before. And so companies that want to go fast have to always be thinking, what's wrong with what I make that everyone loves? What could I do better? What in my wildest dreams could this better solution look like? And now I'm going to make that happen. So you have to have a vision of how to be better and how to meaningfully improve the results for your customers.
Great. I'm just taking a look to make sure there's no other questions from the audience. I think maybe a great way to end this is coming off of of COVID and the pandemic. People have had to slog through a lot. What is one thing, looking out into the future, that you feel very optimistic about for the supply chain space or for the world in general? No, it's a hard question.
For the supply chain, I am so optimistic because what I observed during the pandemic was an organization and an ecosystem, including my suppliers, including regulators, including customers, who really figured out how to work together. It wasn't systems making things happen. It was mind power. It was conviction about making things happen and being committed to serving our end customer. I'm an ingredient. Most of my customers are ingredients. How do we make sure that our end customer gets what they need? And the collaboration that I saw, the willingness to say, okay, this is how we always did it. Here's how we can pivot to come up with an alternative was amazing. And it was fast. You know, I usually have a process where you need to have a PO and you need to have someone approve the PO and you need to have this. Well, I needed PPE, 2 million PPE a month for my factory in China. And every time I tried to go buy some masks, somebody swooped in with cash and bought them. So we just said to every commodity manager, you find PPE, you buy it, you give them cash, no problem, we'll cover you. Or you need this particular chemical, just go put an obligation in for a year's supply of it, because we didn't know how things were going to be. And so the resilience and the adaptability, as well as the creativity of supply chains all the way through to our customers was just wonderful. And I'm still seeing that happen, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I'll speak to that sort of from the customer side of that, because we have a big supply chain that serves our factory sites, so we're consuming most of the parts. I think that there is an awareness of like the general fragility of supply chain that came with COVID, right? We got sort of used to everything working really well. And then a really important domino fell, right? And we couldn't get all of the parts that we needed when we needed them, and that's not an okay reason to not make these cars, right? So from a like system perspective, I think that we got a better understanding of where we need to make some improvements, where we need to like maybe keep some things a little closer to home, right? So we don't have to deal with a bunch of shipping stuff by air because freight is like too long, right? Or seeing the variation in the rate of getting stuff to the factories, just like getting nuts. Our warehouses are going to have to get huge, right? How are we going to actually address the supply chain setup, the sourcing, to be able to make the factory still be very efficient? And before that wasn't really a focus. So it really called it into question when it's like, oh, this can break, right? It happens. Like, let's make sure that doesn't happen again. So it's nice to see everything get sort of shored up and get the appropriate focus.
We do have one more question.
So, within the teams that you currently have that are working directly for you, what is the proportion of women to men in terms of your teams now? Is it improving? Has it been static? And do you see a change in the way the company is changing based on that changing dimension?
I think for my direct reports, it's about 40% women, and also a proportion of underrepresented minorities who are male. And diversity is a real focus in our company, not from a quota standpoint, but diversity of thought. And I think bringing people from different backgrounds, different perspectives is what helps strengthen our supply chain. And I do feel like we are making an impact on the company. One of the things that we have tried to do, though, at the most senior levels of the company, though, is to set big corporate goals and say, we want 40% of our leadership to be female. We think that's appropriate. And if there's more, that's all goodness as well. So the tone from the top makes a difference. And we also established a network of women who identify rising stars, who we try to propel to more visibility, to more opportunities that give them operating assignments and so forth, so that they are set up for future success. So it all starts with a pipeline, and we have had a pipeline out of college, graduates, interns, and continued to develop those people so that they're ready to take those senior roles. And I think it's making a difference. But again, I want to say, they are the best supply chain leaders. They're not the best women supply chain leaders.
Yeah, so similar story for me. So I come through engineering, so the vast majority of the people, all of the people who work for me are engineers. So we're sort of starting at a disadvantage. I think from a numbers game, getting people into the team, there's not an even split going through college, right? And then we see as women start to come out of college, the numbers go down and down and down from there. And then the manufacturing sector, historically even lower. So at Tesla, at any manufacturer, it's common to see women come into the workplace and then leave a few years later for a wide variety of reasons that is related to the industry and not related to the women. My team, when I started on it, I was the only woman for a long time. My direct team now, I've been there 8.5 years. Again, all engineering team is now about 50% women, which is no accident, right? It's the work of a lifetime, I think, to do. And it's not just me picking through the resumes and like, I want the woman one, right? I've got the best engineering team in the world, right? Like, it's you have to build the culture to be able to attract and to keep that skill set, right? And that's what we've done.
And on that very good note, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming and celebrating these two excellent supply chain leaders, Meredith and Jackie. Thank you for joining us today. And I'd also like to thank, again, our wonderful sponsor, Metro Supply Chain, who helped make all this happen. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.